Hello from Paris and Athens. My name is Stephanie Papadakis and I am the Vice President of the Hellenic Institute of Cultural Diplomacy here in Paris. And we welcome today for an interview Ms Debbie Papadaki, who is a research historian of the military history, focuses especially on crisis period. Ms Papadaki is also a teacher, a poet, and a writer. She has her own blog where she publishes her articles and which we will share with you after this interview. Last but not least, she's after all a humanitarian, and in particular by helping children and women. So our today topic will focus especially on the following title: nurses, doctors, firefighters, or volunteer workers during any war, whether it is declared or undeclared, aren't they silent heroes? In other words, the main idea of the interview will be a comparative analysis of the past and the present silent heroes. So enough now with this introduction. I think it's the time to give the floor to Ms. Papadaki, who is a specialist on the subject. So Ms. Papadaki, you have the floor.
First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me for this interview. I'm honored, and in particular by your institute, because I do believe that cultural events and culture do bring people together, and it also helps them to share what they know with different people from different countries. So thank you once again, Stephanie, for having me here.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you, Ms. Papadaki.
Okay. Now, what I would like to talk about is I'd like to talk about the silent heroes of the Great War. Why? Because, first of all, they put their lives on the line to save lives, and they were never mentioned before in history. And in 2014, I was invited to write poetry about them. The honor of writing about women in action, particularly the nurses and doctors stationed on the island of Limnos, located in Greece, was requested by the Hellenic Lyceum of Sydney in Australia by Mrs. Catherine Stojanovic, a prominent representative of the HLS, who organizes cultural events collaborating with traditional Greek dancing groups from the Greek islands and the mainland, bringing them to Australia and enhancing cultural life there, and bringing people together and creating lasting relationships between Australia and Greece. This alone enhances an understanding between cultures, bringing people together. If we understand and share information and historical events of what had happened and what brought people together, it helps us understand and helps us in the future. It is women like her and many other ladies behind the scenes working tireless for charity, promoting culture, that play a vital part in society, in which the course of their living everyday lives, together with the ethics and the values that they embrace, mark the course of events that have led to show us on coming generations on how to do things and to give life added meaning. So originally this work was presented and done to mention the silent heroes that were not mentioned in history. I remember each year from my childhood, Anzac Day on the 25th of April was commemorated those that had fallen in battle with honors. Indeed, they should be honored due to the fact that these men and women gave their lives as they saw it their duty to support their fellow men with courage and personal sacrifice. How did they do it is the question that should be asked, presenting their reasons to be written in history. Furthermore, since the Great War, nothing was ever the same. Everything changed. The way people thought, the way people lived had changed. The course of social history marked changes with women entering the workforce and gaining their right to vote. Naturally, the course of history challenged these changes, as these changes challenged the course of history, which brings us to this day for governments and organizations through political and economic institutions to acknowledge these changes and to respect societies of people. Well, on the 10th of May in 2014, a chapter was inspired by wanting to remember the women who trained as nurses. These nurses vowed to follow the men who were their husbands, their fiancés, their brothers, as they headed into battle to fight in what is known as the Great War. It was the war to end all wars. Yes, did it ever? I don't know. Who were these women? What did they encounter? How did they overcome difficulties in their efforts to help the wounded? How did they feel? What can be said about their character, having to organize hospitals and casualty units? Their story is not told in history. It will unfold in a course of poetry that I had written, and accounts bringing to life the images and the experiences learned. In the light of Nurses' Day, we commemorate the sacrifice and the diligent service of the nurses of the Australian Army Nursing Service, the AANS, the Queen Alexandra Imperial Military Service, the QAINS, known as the Red Cross nurses, and the Australian Casualty Cleaning Station, the 3rd ACCS. These silent heroes accompanied and stood by the soldiers of the Great War in Gallipoli. A series of poems and written accounts will be documented to be presented in their honor. It was the first time in history mankind had entered such a war of such grand scale. It was known as the war to end all wars. No one knew the magnitude of the destruction and the loss of life that it would cause. No one knew what they expected to find supporting their loved ones as they left the security of their shores. Many nurses in Greece stood by these nurses from Australia and New Zealand in the Mediterranean. Many more nurses worked heroically throughout the European continent too. Lest we forget, we shouldn't forget these silent heroes.
Okay, so thank you for this first part. So to sum up, you discussed with us the past silent heroes during the World Wars I and II, especially Greek nurses and doctors, by helping the local communities, but also international communities in Australia, for example, in such a period of crisis. Do you wish to give more input on how these nurses really helped the local or international communities, what they have done, what really was their role there? So do you have any details to give us before we pass to our second part?
Well, 100 years ago, we know very well that the World War brought people into conflict. There were two fronts, basically. And the nurses that did come from Australia, they came to support England and they came to support their soldiers. They didn't know what they would experience. They didn't know what they would encounter. The only thing they knew is that they would provide comfort, they would provide support for their soldiers, medical support to the best of their ability. And what usually happens in situations like this, you adjust with what you know. What you're trained for is never enough with what you encounter. they came from Australia to Greece, and they experienced a different situation. They had problems receiving supplies from England. That problem was partially solved with the local people that supported them with what little they had, and also with different ideas of accounting problems with supplies and medicine. They used herbs. They used different things that the people in the local area used. Now, in 1915, they also went to France. So these nurses from Australia and also nurses from Greece, they were allies, they also went to France. And they supported the military there. Naturally, their experience also went along with them. They started, even nurses became doctors with their experience. And that's what helped change their role as well, adapting to every difficult situation. So there are accounts, and there have been accounts of medical teams, both men and women, nurses and doctors from different countries that were allies, teaming together and exchanging ideas and improving their situation to the best of their ability with very little that they had, because supplies were always difficult.
I see. True. Okay, so now I think that we should move forward to our next topic, which is how the present silent heroes looks like nowadays, and whether we can find any similarities or even differences with the past silent heroes.
Well, whether a war is declared or undeclared, any crisis situation is a war-like situation. So that's one thing I've realized. With the economic crisis that Greece has had, you know, I felt it was like a war-like situation and survival was important. The same thing can be said about epidemics and pandemics. COVID-19 did bring a devastating situation here in our world. It shook our world, and it will cause a lot of economic problems. It will cause a lot of hardship as well, because well, you can say the population has increased. You can say that the natural habitats have diminished, and microbes and germs and viruses have become more aggressive. And this is challenging our silent heroes today. I mean, there are many, many people that do express opinions about a situation, and there are those that don't express opinions, but focus on the facts and what they find in research. These silent heroes are working in research centers, are working beside doctors as nurses. They are working with their patients, and they are putting their lives on the line. A lot of work is being done now, but the only difference is, in comparison to what existed 100 years ago, because they also had diseases. Any war situation that destroys a natural habitat creates disease. They had diseases then too, but they were epidemics because less people traveled. Nowadays, a lot of people travel and had traveled and have been traveling, which helps spread the disease. And that's what we're experiencing nowadays. A lot of people are spreading the disease, and the disease itself is also mutating. This is challenging, extremely challenging, but the technology we have nowadays helps us to a great extent. Our education has helped us to a great extent, and that's what we should focus on. And that's what the silent heroes now are focusing on, what they know, what they can communicate with and share with other research teams, other doctors, into solving this, this problem and combating the invisible enemy, because it is an invisible enemy.
So to understand, there is with the COVID-19, the present silent heroes for you are doctors nowadays and nurses that they are encountering this disease, comparison with the past silent heroes, which again, there were nurses and doctors that they were helping local communities during the world wars. But also there is a second part what we can discuss, and you can give us more information about nowadays with the firefighters and workers or volunteers during the fires that not only hit Greece, but also other countries in Europe and all over the globe.
I don't know what to say. What we're experiencing nowadays is never before seen. We've never experienced such a situation. So many, we will call them wildfires. And many have claimed that it is due to climate change. Well, the climate crisis nowadays, because yes, ice has been melting and the natural habitats are changing. A lot of natural habitats are being destroyed currently with the fires, which is devastating. And we don't know what will happen in the future with diseases as it becomes more aggressive. Usually when natural habitats are destroyed, the food chain becomes more aggressive. And even wild animals die. And we're also vulnerable to this situation too. Now, with the fires, there are two things that are causing them from what I've heard from the news reports in Greece. We not only have had, say, a change in the climate, it being hotter, as it's reported in Italy and in France too. But we've also had experience with arson, and that's one thing that a number of people are investigating. There's a special judicial request investigating how each fire is caused, because there've been well over 500 to 1,000 fires so far this summer. In July, in August, I mean, there have been 555 fires in August alone. And I know that there are a lot of problems in Italy and in France too. I mean, it's the first time ever that 22 countries had come to help Greece extinguish the fires. And we don't know what problems that will cause economically to the people in the agricultural area, in the agricultural field, because there have been forests that have been damaged, that have been destroyed. In other words, this is going to affect the honey industry, the bees. I mean, we don't want people moving to survive, but you know, we have to find some solutions to these problems as well.
I agree with you. And you were also a present silent hero, right? Because, excuse me, you have also helped, right, during these fires, and also your children. So maybe you can give us a more personal insight of what you have done as a volunteer, right?
Well, in 2001, there were devastating fires on the island of Samos. I lived on the island of Samos, which I call the Evergreen. It's such a beautiful island. It combines the mountains and the sea. I've written poetry about Samos. It's so beautiful. And I loved the island. It's the place where my mother was born. And I was very fortunate to have lived on the island as well. I got married there. I had my children there, and we were able to live off the land with cheese, with beautiful, with fresh milk and fresh fruit and vegetables. And the fires that I saw at 5 o'clock that evening, it's very strange when fires start at 5 o'clock. They don't start coincidentally at 5 o'clock in the evening, in the afternoon. And there were 5 different fires that devastated the island. They burned forests that had never been burnt before, not even during the German occupation when they tried to chase partisans. They tried burning the forest then, but they couldn't. They were so dense. And the canopy of the trees covered the roads, and there was never sunlight on some roads. The forests were that thick. Well, these forests were destroyed. Now, during that fire, I saw ash falling into my courtyard. And I told my husband, I said, you're an amateur radio operator. Sierra Victor 8, Echo Charlie Juliet. That was his call sign. And I said, you can communicate with people. What we should do is we should train volunteers how to use the VHF and how to stop fires. And that's what we did. We trained 1,500 people as volunteers. We trained them how to use the VHF, how to read the frequencies, and we also organized and helped with the fire brigade for them to be trained. And that's what we did through the Civil Protection Department. And we didn't do it and then receive anything because we were volunteers. And even in the evenings, we used to go patrolling. And yes, at some occasions, we did catch people trying to instigate fires. And unfortunately, these people were from different countries coming to the island.
It's really, I mean, it's,
yeah. Arson is a problem because, as I said, economic war is also something that we encounter, and which is very unfortunate as a people. I mean, people of anywhere and everywhere, I think, should be more humane, and they should cooperate with each other rather than anything else.
Yeah, so a positive message that we can send to our auditors and to all over the world is that, so from all of what we heard from you, I think that solidarity and humanity
yes.
should be the one that we should protect, and that were present not only in the past, but they are still present nowadays. So this is something that we should take on. But however, I think that we should highlight it, that these two values should not only be present in a period of crisis, but also, and more importantly, in a period of prospect.
Yes, so in our everyday lives.
Exactly.
The values we have, I mean, as volunteers, from the moment you have knowledge, share that knowledge. From the moment you have time, share your time to improve a situation. That's what I've taught my children. Actually, I haven't taught them. They were able to witness everything that I've done. I've modeled how to live and what to do in any situation, whether it be a crisis situation or knowing something and sharing it with other people. It's very, very important. We do live in a world of knowledge, and we do live in a world of technology. We should use that technology to save our environment, because we live on a small planet, and the small planet is just a little spaceship. And our atmosphere is only 30 kilometers big. That's the only way I can describe it. That's how I describe it to children. I said, you know, if you walk 30 kilometers, it will take you about 5 to 6 hours. But, you know, that's how big our atmosphere is. Not much. Not much.
Okay.
Take care of it.
So my question to you, more concrete, even though you have already touched upon, is that how should we be ready and to predict that kind of crisis, and what we should do, get some solutions on this, if you have?
Well, knowing our instinct, or knowing humanity, I think that we should expect crisis. But one thing we should do is always work for the better, and we can work for the better. We have education, and we should also implement education at schools. We should organize our municipal councils in handling crisis situations. In other words, everyone in the community should know and should cultivate small agricultural community farms, small agricultural community gardens. And if people can create these things through the schools, through groups, through neighborhoods, first of all, it would instigate survival. It would help improve their quality of life. They will have access to food. And it will also instill values and respect for life and survival. I don't know if many people understand that or will embrace that at all, but there are quite a few people that do understand this, as they did in Australia hundreds of years ago, 200 years ago, when they went to a hardened land and they had difficulty adjusting there. I mean, also here in Greece, you can say that Greece does have a challenging landform, which makes you think of how to cultivate things. And you can cultivate things, and the things that you do cultivate are quite unique and beautiful because of the microclimates that exist. Well, the same thing can be done in different municipalities, in different countries of the world. If we instigate the education of agriculture and the cultivation of community gardens as a program that should be followed, then I think we'll be less reliant on energy, we'll be less reliant on other processed procedures that we do follow nowadays for survival.
I agree with you, Ms. Papadaki. Okay, so now maybe we can proceed to our last part. I think we have the pleasure to hear from you one of your poems related to this subject. And I suppose that the audience can't wait to hear it from you, and so do I. So the floor is all yours.
Well, I am passionate when I do write poetry because I try to include as much information as I can. I like condensing information into a few words, and for people to have an image of what was experienced. Well, this is the poem that I wrote. It was the first poem, The Unforgotten Silent Heroes of World War I. That's what, and I wrote it in 2014. It starts with, lest we forget. Never before in history books have I encountered their names. Never before had these nurses been mentioned, nor accounts of the magnitude of pain. Never before had the youth of Australia seen the capability of mass devastation that a world war could bring. For they had true values of loyalty in their hearts, in support of the drumbeat from the motherland right from the start. However, these nurses, doctors, soldiers, as the story goes, you will see, they discover true mateship of added values at Limnos and Gallipoli. For Australia's Andrew Fisher backed Great Britain's urge to victory, pledging support to the last man, to the last shilling, marked our history. As Australia in 1900 was a new nation, international ground it wanted to mark, supporting honour, what they believed in and was logical, that set them apart. Thus, Australians and New Zealanders came in great numbers from states and towns. People that were teachers, maids, farmers, bushmen, city workers, clerks, architects, civilians, they still came in crowds. Gathered in strength as volunteers, as soldiers in thousands, more were bound. For the nation's bells had sounded according to the warp of the drumbeat. These soldiers, these diggers known as all fair dinkum to be, they were followed by their wives, fiancées, sisters, as doctors and nurses we see. Their bravery, their Australian spirit that had developed from a new land was to bound with a hardened people on a Greek island, I have come to understand. The island of Limnos today, memorial stands so proud to be, in memory of the Anzac diggers and the silent heroes we all can see. At the Great War, these people, the Limnians, Australians, had come to be, forming a strong bond of fraternity for humanity. 100 years on, now may we mark their names as nurses, doctors, and common people that tried to soothe the pain. 100 years on now, may we mark and see the humane support given by those on Limnos after the carnage on Gallipoli. 100 years on, may we remember the Australian youth of that day that penned out history in a different way. To you and me, they were soldiers, nurses of the Great War, but carried a story of mateship worth to be told. They were unique in values and strength. I have come to see the AANS, the QAIMNS, and the third ACCS are two known as the Anzacs in history.
Very interesting poem, Ms. Papadaki. Thank you for sharing it with us. And I think it was the most appropriate closing statement for this today interview. I think that we are running out of time, and maybe we will end this interesting discussion by thanking, first of all, Ms. Papadaki for her time and her useful inputs. I think we learned a lot, even though we do not have lots of time to discuss and go deeper in details, but this will not necessarily mean that we will not have any further interviews with you either in that topic or in another topic that you have written too. Yeah, sure.
I would like to thank you very much for having me. I normally don't talk in public. I usually write. And having to talk to you was an honor, particularly France, because I know that France had supported Greece during the fires, one of the 22 countries that came to support us, and they have supported us in cultural events. They have supported us in many things. We do have and share quite a number of years of sharing cultural and like-mindedness.
Great point.
I would say that we are like-minded. The French and the Greek are very like-minded. We share the same values, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure too. I'm living in Paris, so I have the impression that I will agree with you in that point.
Oh, okay. I haven't been to Paris yet, but I have been to Corsica and Sardinia.
Okay, it's an opportunity to come here.
Okay.
And also thank you for our auditors to hear us today, and please feel free to write your comments through our social media, and Ms. Papadaki will be available to respond the soonest possible.
I would like to respond to the comments, yes, because I think it's very important that we do share our knowledge of things and how we could improve our world. So constructive criticism, I think, would be extremely valuable, and see what we can do.
Yeah, let's see for a better world. So
yes.
as we say it in French, bonne continuation, bon weekend, καλή συνέχεια, καλό Σαββατοκύριακο. Thank you, Ms. Papadaki, again.
It's an honor once again. It's an honor being part of this forum, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you for accepting.
Good afternoon, and kalispera.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.